Welcome one, welcome all. You are listening to Music Talks and I'm Leon Hill. Every week we talk to the great and the good, the wise and the wonderful, the people that make this one of the most vibrant and interesting industries on the planet. But this week we've made an exception. I'm kidding. As usual, we have a cracking show lined up for you this week. We speak to one of the industry's most tireless hustlers, Mr. Olly Barnes. Olly is no stranger to the world of music startups and is indicative of the kind of entrepreneur that's returning to the music industry, attracted in no small part by the big money stacked on the back of the streaming gravy train. Olly talks us through his current project, which you may already be across, the much talked about smartphone app, Voisey, and gives us an insight into how he got there. Along the way, he shares wisdom and wit in equal measure, all in his trademark machine gun delivery. You have been warned. Olly tells us to be fearless in the doors you kick down, how success in tech is all about responding to something, and how not to get your foot bitten off by a gator in a business meeting. Trust me, he's anything but boring. And do listen closely, because there's a lesson in this episode. One of the reasons we wanted to talk to Olly is because he is a master of what he does. No slouch at PR, Olly knows the value in a hard sell, but he also knows the value of creating an emotional attachment, and that an interesting story can build a narrative around a product that shifts far more units than even the hardest of sells. This isn't someone that waves forecasts, balance sheets and business plans under your nose, hoping that you'll bite. He expertly draws you in with a strong narrative, the heart of which is the product. No wonder he can afford to be selective about where he takes his investment from. But first, let's hit the housekeeping. Our plan to become the industry's #1 alternative music podcast continues unabated. Welcome to our new listeners. Please subscribe if you like what you hear. We love listeners, but we love subscribers just a tiny bit more. And a big welcome to our new listeners in Spain, muchas gracias, in Italy, grazie mille, and Saudi Arabia, shukran. If you like what we're doing, please share with your friends, colleagues, peers or pets. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. We are almost everywhere. You may need to dig through search results a little, but let's face it, apparently we aren't the only music podcast out there. Reviews and 5 stars will help push us up the search rankings, so show some love where you can. We have subscription links on our website, www.musictalks.fm, and you can also listen to all of our episodes there too, www.musictalks.fm. On Insta, we are at Hello Music Talks, the same on Twitter, and finally, don't forget to check out this week's accompanying playlist, featuring the artists and tracks we name check on the show, and beefed out with some of Olly's personal selection. So without further ado, roll up, roll up, roll up. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hold on to your hairnet, stick the pedal to the metal, and get acquainted with hustler extraordinaire, the fastest talking man in show business, the omniscient Olly Barnes.
Music Talks.
Olly Barnes, good to see you. Thank you for hosting us at your office, the offices of Space 8 in the middle of London's West End. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got to be where you are right now?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very excited about your podcast. I hate the phrase, but I'm a music entrepreneur. So since 2004, I've been sort of starting companies or working with interesting new companies in music, doing kind of my piece in what I feel has been very, very important. If I took one stance, it's really been like many people in music, desperately obsessed with music, was never quite good enough to be a guy in a band. And so I think I've really turned my hand to using technology, starting companies and spying opportunities that would make other people start bands. I care deeply about music, and what I've really set out to go and do is to see, can I start companies or encourage companies I work with to start companies or products that will make people more excited about being a music fan.
Very quickly, just give us a name check of what those companies, businesses you started, worked for are, and then maybe we can dig into that timeline and find a little bit more out about them.
So started a company called UMYX back in 2004, which is the first interactive music format, let you remix songs by big bands, which I launched with Muse. From there, I briefly went to Groove Shark, which was a very, one of the biggest illegal music sites in the world, or unlicensed, which I went to work with them to try and make them legal, which ultimately was a futile thing. We had creative differences. I went from there to Universal Music Group. I was director of global digital business at Universal Music. And while I was there, I did a bunch of things, but I proudly was one of the founding members of a company called The Clique, which was Africa's first content-wide streaming service, which did in partnership with Samsung. From there, I went to Audio, which is kind of when streaming was really taking off. Audio was a streaming service started by the two founders of Skype, Nicholas Zenstrom and Janis Friis. I initially ran licensing there. I launched it we launched 55 countries in the first 18 months. And then I went on to be global head of business development before we sold it to Pandora a couple of years back in the US. From there, I went to EscapeX, which is a venture capital funded, big VC thing, kind of interesting, less said about it, the better. And then, I landed with the two things I do right now, where I represent Space 8 Games, a very compelling, exciting mobile games company. I represent them for music strategy, and we've been working on a stealth project for a couple of years, which we're kind of excited about. And I'm also a co-founder of a company called Voisey, which is rolling out through the rest of the world at the end of this year. But it's a very exciting one, which I'm sure we'll talk more about.
Fantastic. Some of those names we may be more familiar with than others. So let me dial you all the way back to your time in UMYX and tell us a little bit more about that, and let's walk through the rest of those.
So I guess as anyone that really cares about music, you're a frustrated musician. And I've played guitar in my life, but actually where the only place I found I could really probably make a mark is by starting companies, or more kind of looking at technology and trying to work out how it could kind of broaden the creative playing field in some way, or just deliver something interesting that wasn't already there. Yeah, I hate the word entrepreneur, but I guess I do a lot of hustling. I launched a company called UMYX many years ago, which is at that point the world's first kind of interactive music format. I think back in the day when the internet first appeared, and we all imagined it was going to have these incredible creative applications for music, and it was going to make being a music fan better than ever before. In fact, what we didn't really realize, all it really did was basically just destroyed the music industry. And let's face it, I think we probably go back to in 2019, there's a point in owning music again. There's a point in sort of working in music again. But I think I was, when the internet first appeared, I was one of those few that was like, wow, this is going to be a world of creative opportunities. So I started this company UMYX, which was the first time you could have remixed songs by big band.
To get the timeline started, when are we talking about exactly?
So that was 2004. It took some time to get going, but it was very exciting. I still stand by that business, and I loved it. I think we got killed by we got killed after many years of operation. We ran it for 7 years.
Wow.
The premise was, I had sort of straight out of university, had some sort of terrible job, was thinking like, wow, why can't people change what music sounds like? You spend all this time recording in studios where you've got different guitar tracks, different vocal tracks, and of course the final mix is the final edit of everything that's taken place. And I thought, well, hang on a second, if like Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead is recording 3 different guitar parts, why can't the user choose which one or the listener choose which one to listen to?
Were you working with artists directly? Were you working with labels?
Well, to start with, bear in mind, I'd never worked in music before and didn't know anyone that did. I'd never heard the word startup before. I didn't know about the concept of investors or anything like that. But I just knew that when I buy a CD and put it into my computer, why can't a multi-track format pop up that looks a bit like musical Lego, so I can then turn things on and off and mess around with it, which was to many a terrible idea, to me a brilliant idea, and I got a long way with it. And so I launched it with Muse in the end. Muse had a single called Butterflies and Hurricanes back in the wonderful day where you used to have CD singles and the labels used to fill the CDs with extra shit. And so I hustled, kind of begged, borrowed, literally knocking on doors, and got to the point where I managed to meet someone that worked with someone that knew this guy that worked on Muse's label, and went all the way through this kind of very convoluted process that ended up with a meeting with me and seeing Matt, the singer from Muse, at Psalm West Studios, where I'd created this kind of really rudimentary demo of what UMYX, the format, would look like.
Sorry to interrupt you. So this is something that technically you programmed, you created? Were you working with, was it a group of friends? How did you sort of actually pull together the technology to put in front of the artists?
So again, a lot of hustling. So I didn't know anyone that wrote computer code or really even had a computer at the time. And so my brother-in-law, I think he liked my enthusiasm for the idea. I think that's probably been a staple of maybe my career to date. In fact, is like often what's made things work is I have such unflinching belief in an idea and then fill in the details afterwards, or sometimes sometimes don't. But I had such unwavering belief in this thing. So I persuaded my brother-in-law, I was like, the music format of the future is going to be where people change what their bands sound like without ever having to have any musical skills. And so he was like, okay, Ollie, I think maybe to shut me up. He then we established his company, and then he gave me £10,000 for 10% of the company. Easiest ever investment round, in fact. But then I went and met this one guy through a friend who knew this amazing computer programmer called Harry Richardson, who still is a great friend to this day. I told him the idea, and Harry's a genius, Cambridge computer science graduate. And I told him the idea. He was like, no, I don't want to do it. And so then, meeting resistance and getting past it was, something that happens a lot in a music career. But I managed to persuade Harry simply because Apple released the first really glossy MacBook Pro computers at that point in time. And anyone that liked computers loved these things. So rather than trying to ply Harry with money, I said, if I buy you one of these with the £10,000 that I'd raised. So yeah, and so it was born from there. It's basically this whole idea of kind of hustling and believing. But got to the point where and it took literally maybe 15 or 20 hustle meetings to the point where it was me with Matt Bellamy from Muse at Psalm West Studios in London, where he made the decision saying are we going to release our single using your new music format UMYX or not? And I managed to persuade him, yes.
The first thing that springs to mind, as somebody that's worked as a lawyer at a major label and has had somebody like you come and request the stems to utilize in an app, there's an incredible amount of reluctance to relinquish that kind of control over the final sound of a track. How did you deal with that? Stems? No, nothing to do with flower arranging. Stems is the term used to describe the individual different tracks that are mixed and mastered into a final recording. And what does that mean? Well, as Ollie has just been saying, typically when you listen to a piece of recorded music, there are multiple instruments and often vocals. Very rarely are these all played at once and recorded together. Usually, each instrument plays its piece and is recorded separately. Likewise with the vocals. These individual recordings, or stems, are then mixed together and mastered. Mastering is the process by which a final mix is sonically buffed and polished so that it sounds as near to perfect as possible and ready to be distributed. So if you have the stems of a track, you can decide how much of one instrument you hear, when you hear it, and if you even hear it at all in your own personal mix of your favourite Muse song, for example. Okay, back to those vocal stems.
Oh, absolutely. Well, as you say, so working as a lawyer where people come to request stems, I was the first guy ever that did that. And so in the early days, this was 2004. So I remember going and actually Tim Clark, who manages Robbie Williams, he was one of the first guys I went to go and see. And they sent us a 2-inch tape.
Wow.
No word of a lie.
2-inch tape is what was, and in some places still is, used to record mastered mixes of tracks. So your stems will be mixed and mastered, and the final master recording would be made onto a 2-inch magnetic tape, large reel-to-reel tape. Back in the day, these master tapes would be pulled out of the archives every time a new release of recording was scheduled or a new format released. Now, it's fair to say, the use of digital recording technology has rendered 2-inch tape all but obsolete, although I've no doubt there are purists out there that would argue the benefits of magnetic tape over digital audio formats. And they may well be right.
I managed to hustle. I got Orange, the mobile phone network, who were looking to do something with UMYX at the time. We managed to have a meeting with them where we hired Olympic Studios Studio One.
Wow.
No word of a lie. Basically, to try and get the stems off it, we constructed this meeting with Orange mobile phones at Olympic Studio with me and Jeremy Marsh, an old friend. Jeremy was chairman of my first company, UMYX. Jeremy's a wonderful, he's been a mentor from my career, was formerly president of BMG before it became Sony BMG, and now is one of the kind of main guys at Warner Music Group, and is the guy that's been a kind of an amazing sort of friend and sort of guiding hand to me from really me popping up. He's one of the first guys when I was going around trying to pitch UMYX that didn't say this is a terrible idea. He said it's probably a terrible idea, but you might be able to pull it off. Having launched an issue with Muse, then we went on to work with The Killers, with Rihanna, with Paul McCartney, with the list goes on and on. It became very, very exciting. And then during that time, we saw the growth of suddenly social networking became a thing with MySpace, and then even things like Flash version 10, where you could suddenly start streaming applications on the internet. And so I did an early deal with when Flash 10 just appeared. I did a deal with Vodafone telephone and UMYX throughout Europe with MySpace. And so all these early times where you could avail a new music experience to consumers using technology. And I was the guy that was kind of stringing these things together and persuading artists to get involved. And no one was making any money out of it.
Is UMYX something you're still involved with? Is it something you've moved on from?
At the time, I thought it could be, we did this wonderful deal with Warner Music Group, which, promised to make us all enormously rich. But as is often the case, is being rich on paper is very different to being rich in real life. But this one was, for me, I loved it. It was that foundation. And I went on from there and I met a bunch of interesting friends. And also towards the end of UMYX is when things like SoundCloud started and Spotify started. So in that you had that sort of the people that were sort of almost deemed to be idiot enough to start music companies at the time. And so I'd spent a lot of time with Alex, who started SoundCloud, and Daniel, who started Spotify.
It's a great peer group to be building ideas, and it's a great peer group to have around you, because, you're mentioning Alex Lung from SoundCloud. Well, SoundCloud, the YouTube of music. In Berlin back in 2008, Alex Leung and Eric Wolfors conceived of SoundCloud. The service was online the following year, and it wasn't much longer before it became known as the YouTube of audio. Alex and Eric were music makers themselves, what might now be called creators. A year later, and investors were regularly flinging millions of dollars at the pair, and they weren't the only ones to see the potential for this fantastic service. Users, listeners and creators flocked to the service in droves. By 2010, they were reaching 180 million people per month. In 2013, they were attracting 20 million new users a month. Just think about that for a minute. And in the interest of transparency, it was soon after this that I joined the company to help negotiate and secure licenses from labels, publishers, performance rights organisations around the world in preparation for the launch of their subscription streaming service, snappily titled On SoundCloud. From the launch of On SoundCloud, it's been a rocky road for the startup. Some say that its past as an unlicensed platform meant that rights holders were never going to forgive and forget. Some even said as much. But after some internal restructuring, including Alex stepping down from role of CEO, we've seen more streamlining, better relations with rights holders, and what has now evolved into a credible player in the streaming ecosystem, one that has carved out and retains a unique service beloved by millions around the world. And yes, I am a fan of Eric and Alex, good, smart people without whom the world would be just a tad less orange. Spotify need no introduction.
Yeah.
In terms of sort of who you're working with and what was going on at the time, I think that paints a very interesting picture of what was, on the one hand, an industry in turmoil, but on the flip side, the opportunity to do anything, try anything, and see what worked.
I think what was interesting there as well is all of us that started companies back then were responding to something. It's about responding to something, right? And if you think like Daniel Ek and Spotify he was responding to piracy, and you know what? It worked. Right? It really didn't just respond to piracy as in what is better than free. He designed what's better than, when him and his team designed what's better than free, and then built arguably one of the most important companies in the history of music from it. Like Alex and SoundCloud, he was responding to, we have the internet now, and how will sound travel on the internet? Admittedly, the problem I was trying to tackle with UMYX was far smaller in scope, because mine was like responding to why can't I have a more creative experience as being a music fan?
Everybody wants to be the guitarist. Everybody wants to be the singer. There's a huge amount of desirability in those people that occupy the creative roles within the industry. You were an aspirational musician. I think we've all been in that position.
Absolutely. And that thing is it just, respond to something, right? I think a lot of people, the reason that the music industry has an absolute sort of elephant's graveyard of dead ideas, because a lot of time people, and I think we'll come to this, but people aren't responding to something. Maybe they're responding to the fact that they want to start a company. But actually, the things that really work in the music industry, whether you're an artist or whether you're building something for artists to be delivered through, I really always look for the opportunities that are coming over the brow of the hill but aren't quite here yet. Like if you respond to something, you're going to be either wrong or right. Whereas if you just start a company or start an idea or write some terrible song, no one's ever going to give a fuck, really. And they shouldn't either. But so I went from UMYX, I said the baptism of fire that happened there, and I learned everything from you. Seeing tech, understanding artists, learning how to fucking kick kick down doors, raise money, all that stuff. And then went from there. There's a brief sojourn trying to advise Groove Shark, at that point, the biggest illegal music site in the world. And also, but actually just a brilliant service.
Hang on a second. Just say that bit again. Groove Shark were the...
But I think they were the largest illegal music site in the world. It's this amazing young bunch of guys in Gainesville, Florida, a tiny town that kind of monsoon rain for an hour every day and has alligators in the local pond. Believe me, I've been there. Nearly got a foot bitten off. You don't believe, growing up in Chiswick, right? You don't believe that on a kind of business trip to go and see guys you're working with, that a walk to the local pond could involve losing a limb to an alligator.
But you were just thinking Disneyland.
I've never been to Disneyland, but no, I've never been able to, but it's an amazing thing. That's what, again, mixing all the stories. That's the wonderful thing about music, is you get to meet people that you probably ordinarily wouldn't have met. And I have such fond memories of that, apart from the near alligator bite aside.
Well, I think like sort of, meeting alligators and having your foot bitten off is probably good preparation for some of the meetings that you are going to be in later in your career in the music industry.
Well, we'll come to Universal in a minute. Briefly, at Groove Shark, they were responding to the fact that suddenly you could stream files over the internet. And it was like 35 million daily active users. It was absolutely...
Oh, it was huge.
They were a young bunch of guys that weren't exposed in any way to kind of the stasis of the music industry and how inflexible it could be, or certainly back then could be. And they simply thought, let's just build the greatest product there is. And they did, right? At that point in time, you had 35 million daily active users. People absolutely loved Groove Shark. What they couldn't get their heads around was why it would be so difficult to license music. They proved to be an absolute magnet for people that wanted a music experience, and they were doing brilliantly with it, and they had the right sort of intentions. And I went in there to try and help them turn those intentions into licenses and agreements with the major record companies. But ultimately, I think what they weren't prepared for was quite how complex that would be. I mean, to be honest, almost I wasn't prepared for it. I'd done a bunch of deals by that point with, with the kind of the UMYX days, and I'd done, some big brand deals and some big label deals, but nothing that quite exposes you to the depth of how do you get, 30 million songs licensed. And so ultimately, during that time, I got to know some people at Universal Music Group.
Yeah, again, to sort of contextualize a little bit, at that time, there wasn't anybody going around doing those licensing deals. You had an industry that was on the back foot. The means of distribution are suddenly in somebody else's hands. The method by which you sell the music or distribute the music has completely changed. You can almost cut the labels and the publishers a little bit of slack because it was something they, at the time, they'd never really come across before.
Yeah, this wasn't intentional. That whole thing about about responding to things. I think what the labels and publishers were responding to them was the floor just got swiped out from underneath them. And so they were responding to, how do I understand this new world? And some people went the very, very long and arduous path, for Spotify. That was not an easy journey. It was a very, very expensive, but it was an incredibly bright bunch of people there. But speak to early Spotify people, they thought it was going to take this long or cost that much money to ultimately just do good. And likewise for SoundCloud. SoundCloud was such a beautifully simple proposition. But again, I think what got in their path was that thing where suddenly you become, it was a massive, massive thing. I think it is a big thing. It's had a nice kind of rebirth recently. But I think the complexity of the music industry and rights ownership, and the fact that rights are spread from so many different parties. You've got record companies, publishers, PROs. It's so complex. And if you are one of the lucky few to have one of the lucky or brave or brilliant few to have a great idea, to be able to actually enable it to cut through is incredibly hard. So then I went to join Universal Music Group. And so that was when it was an interesting time where, things like streaming had started to take hold way more. And so I remember when I got there, I think overall digital revenue was 20% and streaming was 10% of the 20%.
Infancy.
Like nothing, exactly. And still, definitely doing interesting things. And you had, interesting companies popping up. You had Deezer, you had Simfy, you had Spotify. I mean, there were lots of people jumping on board. But again, like we were saying with earlier companies, is a lot of people weren't armed for the complexity. And I think arming yourself for the complexity is the intelligence to really map out what the journey is going to look like, but also massively important, map out what the journey is going to cost. Working in music isn't just about brilliant ideas, understanding rights, and having friends. It's also a very expensive venture to come, no matter which version of it you're doing. By having access to a few interesting people, having a great idea, that maybe some people, a sense of entitlement arrives with that, where you think, well, surely my business must have an opportunity to cut out there. No, it's this, I think making any business cut through, whether it's in music or anywhere else, is the same as having a single cut through as being a new artist. It was an interesting time to, just again seeing what was taking place with the music industry at that point in time. And I started, I was proud to be one of the kind of the founding team that started this company called The Clique in Africa at the time, which was Africa's first continent-wide streaming service, which was us at Universal with Samsung. And basically, actually, it was really, even though I was a major label guy at the time, it was the product of kind of barefaced hustling. I went down to South Africa with 4 sheets of A4 paper and my old friend Ralph Simon, and the 4 sheets of A4 paper had different logos on them saying The Clique. And The Clique was a word we'd worked on with an advertising agency over here in the UK called Bartle Bogle Hegarty. And we're trying to work out what, if you were to start a music service that had a name that would resonate in all countries of Africa. And I said to them, that has to pop like the word MTV did back in 1985. What would that word be? And so we did kind of 3 months of research and came up with The Clique. And then the end result of all that very expensive, kind of very Western world research into a brand name was me going down with 4 sheets of A4 paper and then just hustling. I went to go and see the CEO of MTN, the massive African mobile phone network, Safisa Debengwa, went to go and see the CEO of Etisalat and the CEO of Samsung Africa. And literally with my 4 sheets of paper, I said, you've seen what's happened in the world of music elsewhere. Universal Music cares deeply about, I was saying this, probably being generous to Universal Music at the time, but cares deeply about artists and nurturing new talent and cares deeply about Africa, and ended up pulling together this company which we built this application which is a bit like Pandora, kind of streaming internet interactive radio that had local caching because there was no connectivity, wasn't fast enough at the time for people to be able to stream. I mean, not even the UK, let alone in Kenya. And started this company which became very, very exciting. But towards the end of getting that deal done, it was a very complex thing to get, and it was very, very exciting. This idea of like pushing music platforms, using technology to drive music into places where it hasn't been before. But I got one of those wonderful kind of offers you can't refuse from the then very nascent streaming service Audio. And Audio was established by the 2 guys, Nicholas Zenstrom and Janus Friis, who had founded Skype, and they'd sold Skype for several $1 billion. And they'd started Audio, which was kind of, I think theirs was a response to music streaming appearing and being a thing. And they were like, well, let's just make the best product there's ever been, which they did with Audio.
Didn't they have a background in music services?
They did.
Maybe less legitimate ones.
I think they did have, I think Skype was built upon peer-to-peer technology, which was effectively, whether it's Skype or whether it's,
music file sharing.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed. The brains behind Skype, Dane Janus Friis and Swede Nicholas Zenstrom, had a slightly murkier past. They were the founders of Kazaa, one of the precursors to the streaming services we know today. If you don't know it, Kazaa was a file sharing site that operated on a peer-to-peer technology, the same technology that they went on to use to drive Skype and latterly Audio. The big difference between Kazaa and the audio platforms you might be using today is that Kazaa was a download platform rather than streaming, and it was totally unlicensed, what we would refer to as an illegal file sharing platform. Along with their contemporaries of the time, Napster, LimeWire, Kazaa were arguably one of the biggest and bloodiest nails in the music industry's coffin. Commercially, the effects of Kazaa should not be underestimated, whether it's looking at how it helped take down a giant dinosaur of an industry or viewing it as a catalyst for the change that brought us where we are now, accessing rather than owning, streaming rather than downloading. And think of how much landfill plastic we have saved giving up our CD habit. The unlicensed nature of the Kazaa platform saw a payment of $100 million US being made to rights holders by way of reparations. At the time, unlicensed platforms weren't the only ones being chased by rights holders. If you downloaded an MP3 from Kazaa, Napster, or any of their peers, you stood a chance in the US certainly of being hit with a penalty of $750 per track downloaded. As we discussed briefly in episode 1 of the podcast, rights holders and artists, shout out to Metallica, hadn't really got their head around how to deal best with the growing problem of online file sharing. It was against this backdrop of legal letters, multi-million-dollar settlements, and festering animosity that Janus and Nicholas exited Kazaa and moved their attention to starting Skype, which, let's not forget, they sold to eBay for a trifling $2.6 billion US.
It was all about how you can network computers together for efficiency. And they built numerous businesses off them. As I say, some were very legitimate and things that really did change the world, like Skype with the whole world talks for free thing, and some that weren't necessarily so popular. It was a really exciting time, and it ended up with the kind of career the things that you sort of dream of doing. Like I ended up doing strange things like being in Colombia. Did a 50 million euro deal with Grupo Prisa, the biggest Spanish language media company in the world. And you end up in Bogota in Colombia, pitching the kind of the chairman of Grupo Prisa. Where you go there, if you have an idea that you really, really believe in, the belief in it will take you a long way. And so sometimes it will take you to Lagos in Nigeria, or it'll take you to Bogota in Colombia. And what started as a love for basically Metallica and Radiohead ends up taking to somewhere where you're doing these extraordinary, exciting things. And in both those cases, where you have your own personal armed cavalcade. I mean, these guys didn't realize that I'm really not worth the bodyguards I was equipped with. But so I think asked, what did we do in Colombia? Mainly tried to work out how we could get out of the hotel to go and buy cigarettes without them noticing, because they wouldn't let you walk around the streets on your own. I also learned the hard way, sort of this side note, you can edit this out, where if you are walking around the streets of Bogota when it's getting dark on your own, don't walk into what looks like to be a kind of a workers' cafe, asking where the nearest cash point is, and ask how much cigarettes are. Because it's luckily they managed to find me, and I wasn't killed or abducted, but it did get close, and not for the first time in my career.
We're starting to paint a picture of Olly Barnes, the hustler, the guy that won't take no for an answer, and I think in many ways very inspirational, in as much as I think there's probably a lot of people that are listening that are wondering how you get into the industry. There are many doors to it, and I think the clear answer that's coming across here is you just pick your door and you kick it in, and you keep that drive and you keep that desire. And I've
tried to kick down 25 more doors than each one that's opened. It's you really absolutely. I met my first ever time I went to the US, in fact, was for South by Southwest back in 2004, and it's the first time I'd ever done an interview in my life as well. And this guy, it was some rap that's come this long, probably died 15 years ago, but he had this quote that said, "With Olly Barnes, resistance is futile," and I sort of like that. And
Sorry to bust your bubble, Olly. And as every techie worth their iPhone knows, resistance is futile is the tagline of the Borg, the uber bad guys, hell-bent on assimilating everyone in their path. The Borg feature throughout the popular TV show Star Trek: The Next Generation. Back to the chat.
I believe in things, anything I do, I believe in so strongly that, obviously it matters that you get paid and stuff, and it matters that these things paint a full picture and get to fruition. But ultimately, anything I do because, I'm just so into it and so believe in it. And that's why I'm lucky that some of the ideas have cut through. I mean, a lot of them haven't. I mean, even with all that belief, and also with an increasing track record, you still have misses and you still have failures. The failures become, you identify them earlier, and they become fewer and far between as you have more track record and experience.
Okay, we've got a fairly good picture of who you are, what motivates you, and the route you've taken. Where are you at right now?
I'm doing two things right now. There's two massive opportunities that I'd say I'm responding to right now. One is where we currently sit, which is a kind of stealthy project. Space Ape Games are a company I actually struck up a friendship with one of the founders, Simon, where we just started speaking 2.5 years ago about the worlds of mobile gaming and the worlds of music, and the fact these two things don't blend together anymore. And they really don't. If you think about mobile, any gaming and music sort of partnerships.
Guitar Hero, DJ Hero, Rock Band.
Yeah, so since then, 10 years ago, right?
Parappa the Rapper, that's all I can think of.
So Parappa the Rapper, that's your best bet. Okay, I'll take it from here.
Now, Olly may snigger, but Parappa the Rapper was the precursor to all rhythm-based music games that we're familiar with today, whether on console or mobile handset. Launched on the PlayStation way back in 1997, that's right, but that'll be the PlayStation 1, the small grey box. Parappa was a little animated dog who would kung fu rap with his onion-headed sensei in an effort to impress his flower-shaped girlfriend, Sunny. Wow, imagine being in the room when that one was pitched. But let's take a very quick listen to Parappa as he rhymes his way through part of level 1. Oh, and for bonus point and an extra life, can you identify the source of the break they've used? Listen carefully.
Here we go now, kick, punch, block.
Kick, punch, block.
Chop, kick, block.
Chop, kick, block.
Block, now I'm kicking.
Block, chop, kick.
Block, duck, punch.
Block, chop, punch.
Duck, duck, turn.
Well, if If you're a b-boy train spotter, you would have recognised the assembly line break, ripped from the track of the same name by the Commodores, which came out on their Machine Gun album sometime towards the end of the 70s. Maybe Ollie was right. He can take it from here.
So basically, since 10 years ago, right, there hasn't been a really successful partnership between the gaming industry and the music industry. And why is that? In fact, where gaming started to take hold and really start making money, and gaming became not something that people kind of, guys that wear specs and like weird hair like yourself, stay inside playing games all the time. And gaming is now, gaming is as mainstream as Netflix right now. But also the thing with gaming is more valuable in terms of revenue. If the gaming, just mobile gaming alone, just forget PlayStations, forget PCs, is worth more in revenue than the film box office and the recorded music industry put together each year. So it'll be in the region of about $80 billion this year. The opportunist in me has always been thinking, and even from the early days of when Farmville appeared, I've always, my mind's been whirring, thinking there's going to be a time where all the incredible kind of learnings of the mobile gaming industry, there's no question that no one understands more about how to identify and acquire users than mobile gaming companies. No one knows more about how to monetize mobile phone users and entertain them than mobile gaming companies. Whereas I took it as being a kind of a strange thing that they don't work with the music industry. The music industry is not an easy partner. If you're a new company with a new idea, try knocking on the front door of Universal, Sony, Warner.
But I remember doing those licensing deals, and I think the difficulty that you have with working with the music industry historically is when there's a partnership, they like to be the only ones making money.
Yeah.
So the terms that you're getting are so very difficult to work with, and people in the streaming industry would argue that's still the case. But the deals that we were trying to broker and trying to do with companies, Activision, EA, these are the kind of sort of games that are working in that sort of market. The deals that we were doing with them were frankly just...
I think, the word partnership is very strong for what was going on there. If you had zero track record and not a lot of money, the music industry would not acknowledge you with existence. If you had track record and money, they would want all of you.
Of course.
What you had, the gaming industry, faced with two choices. Is do you work out how to go and do deals with the music industry that are survivable, or do you take all of this incredible awareness you have about what people want to do, how they want to be entertained, how they will spend money to be entertained, do you take that and develop your own IP around it, like Angry Birds, or like Clash of Clans, or like Fortnite? And so you've got these absolutely gargantuan new entertainment properties that, from people that were in many cases responding to the fact that, they couldn't work with the music industry. But so Rockstar Games, the guys that founded that company used to work in the DVD department of BMG and were let go.
Oh wow, I never knew that.
Because DVD in games wasn't deemed to be required because they were making so much money off CDs. That's like, who are these gimps? Let's get rid of them. And then suddenly, the guys were turning over. I think GTA 5 is the most successful entertainment product of all time in terms of revenues.
Okay, so it's about time to crunch some numbers. Grand Theft Auto 5, produced by Rockstar Games, was released in 2013 on the PlayStation 3, the Xbox and the PC, with versions later released for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. Not to mention mobile gaming, GTA 5, as it became known, has indeed grossed more in revenues than any other media product in history. That includes books, movies, videos, games. As of the time of recording, sales stood at over 110 million units, racking up revenues for Rockstar of over $6 billion US, which is way more than the combined box office receipts of all the Star Wars movies, but not quite as much as was generated in the US in 2018 by streaming audio subscriptions, which came to a whopping $7.4 billion US.
And the other thing I've been very much involved in is being one of the co-founders of a company called Voisey.
Okay, now this is something I've actually heard other people talking about. I think would be really interesting to find out. Well, I should just let you keep talking, really.
Yeah, well, no one's ever said that before. But so, Voisey is an interesting one. It's myself and 3 friends of mine over in Norway. And we got together about a year and a half ago. Amazing team, great sort of understanding kind of marketing, product and music. And they were looking at a different product, which ultimately was going to be in the long term killed by licensing. what's very, very rare, I find, is to find a bunch of people that are a really well-formed team, that are really switched on, that have kind of great emotional intelligence, that are very realistic and make great-looking products. And so rather than worrying about the fact that this product they were pushing probably wasn't going to have a future in the same way, we started talking about other gaps that might exist in the music industry. There was a company, Musical.ly. And Musical.ly was TikTok. TikTok bought Musical.ly for near enough $1 billion. And the thing now, TikTok is now one of the biggest apps on the planet. It's certainly the most downloaded app in the world. It's one of the most valuable startups in the world. But what we were looking at there was like, wow, there's an opportunity happening there. What you've got is TikTok has taken, social media has always been about looking, really, not about doing. It's about looking about what other people are doing. And I think what TikTok did is it started making people do stuff. And I mean, what they're doing on TikTok is kind of the lowest common denominator of creativity. It's like mime along to something or do some little skit. But it's a marked shift up from looking at someone's picture of a salad or video of a cat. And so we started looking at that thing, and that's quite interesting. And TikTok is a lot of stuff is about music on that, but a lot of stuff is about non-music stuff. And everything I've always done, and again, my co-founders in Voisey, we're music pure.
What is Voisey?
So we thought, almost as a kind of a challenge to ourselves, thinking like, could you make more people write songs than already are writing songs? And it sounds like a terrible premise, right? Already it's like, oh, fucking hell, it's like a songwriting app or something like that. And it sounds terrible, right? But our belief is in creative revolution, which is, there's so much incredible technology out there right now. And there's been so many other creative revolutions that have taken place in recent years. The two that we really looked at, one was Twitter. Twitter had a creative revolution around writing, which it said, curtail it to 140 characters. Anyone can write before. But suddenly, if you say just write 140 characters, a lot more people are prepared to try it out, right? So like me versus J.K. Rowling in 140 characters, I think I'd probably keep pace with her. Can't write a book, can't write an email, can't read an email. So that was an interesting, so suddenly adding brevity meant a lot more people were prepared to start writing on the internet. Like it's an explosion, right? And the other one we saw was Snapchat. So anyone could take photos. There were forward-facing cameras for a long time, right? But what exploded the kind of proliferation of selfies and people taking photos themselves was Snapchat doing one-click filters. Take a photo of myself, but click it. And those are very, very pronounced. It's like make yourself into a dog. Or, we all know what Snapchat does. But we're thinking, wow, so those two, if you add brevity and filters, they've been two creative revolutions. Could we apply that kind of methodology to music? So brevity, why don't you just get people to record a short part of the song? Let's face it, it's all about the hook. It's, since that's the one thing that's is going to outlive us all in the music industry, is like a great chorus, a great 15 seconds is what makes you buy an entire album if anyone does it anymore. And so we're like, okay, let's do a format which is about just hooks, and simultaneously, rather than having mobile capture being either cartoony like Snapchat or way too raw and just like someone singing into a microphone, we thought, let's add some finesse to it. So we licensed auto-tune, we licensed a number of amazing effects, but we packaged them into presets. And so suddenly you can have just like compression, EQ, and reverb, exactly like you would have if you do a preset in Logic or in Pro Tools, just to make the human voice sound like it does on records. Or we do more pronounced ones like add filters, because we have the greatest untapped resource for the music industry on earth is producers' hard drives. I think now you've got, with Ableton, with Logic, with you name it, all these pieces of software out there. Is so much backing track music being created. It's not like backing tracks like library music. These are people that are out there, writing what they think could be the greatest new song. They're obsessed with this thing for a week and tweaking it. And then they don't quite find that top line for it. They don't quite find that verse for it. And then it gets stored in their hard drive and never gets opened again. So we were looking at brevity and the filters. And so we launched in Norway. We raised a small amount of money. We launched in Norway in the very end of November last year, and really just kind of stood back and watched what happened. The music industry is an interesting place right now. You've got the ability for an artist to appear and completely bypass the machine. Like right now you have Ariana Grande, you have these massive artists that are on major record companies, whereas in fact the path that they took to get there, I don't think other artists are going to have to keep taking anymore. I don't think you need to sign away your rights to someone that's going to get you. If you look at being on a major record company right now, it's many things are great. There's A&R people that are brilliant, they have great mentorship, there are good things there. So in the 5,000 people that, I'm not sure what the number is, maybe 5,000 people that work for Universal Music Group, I'm sure there's probably 500 100 of them that are brilliant and really, really valid to the creative process. There's a lot of the other ones that I think are probably just doing stuff that's a rounding error. Problem is, if you are Ariana Grande or if you are Tekashi 69, it seems crazy to sign away your rights to a record company that needs to pay for 5,000 salaries.
We were talking to Gregor Pryor in episode 3, and we were hitting this point across the head as well. And it's something that me particularly, I'm hearing again and again and again. And it's really how that power dynamic is shifting away from the traditional rights holder, the record label / publisher, and moving into the hands of artists and into the hands of their managers who now understand the value of master rights. You know, we've just seen recently the story of Universal Music losing master recordings in a fire in a backlot of Universal Studios in Los Angeles. And, you know, we're talking Elton John, Chuck Berry, heritage acts, as well as Nirvana and more contemporary artists. I think that not only are people realizing that, you know, you don't need the support of a label to get the production quality, the distribution, the marketing, etc., but also, you know what, maybe they're not the best people to do it anymore. And whether that's down to the people that are staffing those organizations, or whether it's down to just the sheer size and the lack of ability to be nimble and be reactive. So yes, I take your point, and I think people will probably understand we're now looking at an industry within which you're able to do the business very differently.
And I think that it's not a case of, you know, I think there's always been that thing whereby, oh, will the internet or will technology enable artists just to pop out of nowhere and have number one records? No, that's never going to happen, because there is filtration that's very much required. But so we have this amazing user on Voisey, she's actually our most popular creator on the app, called Olivia Knight. So Olivia's 18, she works in a grocery store in San Diego, and she's been on Voisey for about 3 months. She's written 55 amazing original songs within the app in that time. But the very first track she ever wrote in Voisey, called Wind Up, it's basically a backing track put up by this young guy called Adrian Cabrera. He's an Ecuadorian guy that lives in Florida. He's a young guy that creates music using Ableton. She heard that loop, she liked it, and she wrote this little loop called Wind Up over it. So we've done a deal with Platoon, which is kind of an artist rights company started by this wonderful guy called Denzel Fiegelson. Voisey isn't about filtering people into being pop stars. It's not talent finding. It's really about just giving people the ability to come and try creating something, and often being surprised at what the response might be. So, you know, for Olivia tried to be a songwriter up to about a year before she got Voisey, and didn't write a single song in a year. And she's a young girl. Finished high school early, and then she got Voisey and started jumping in and doing these, and her videos were connecting in an unbelievable way. And so actually her first and second one, she did one called Wind Up, and then there's a second one called Complicated. But she put those two onto Voisey, and we pushed them onto Facebook, and we got 1.7 million plays in 10 days of those. This is an unknown girl writing, and these are like 15-second long loops, what would just be seen as being the chorus. And the way it connected was unbelievable. What's so exciting is us being able to be part of Olivia's story. And I think, you know, and not giving, you know, obviously Voisey is simply, we're trying to make Voisey really as invisible as possible. It's about people creating amazing things. And Olivia is one of masses of artists already. We've got this incredible girl called Thea. I mean, Thea is 16. She lives outside Oslo. She'd never written a song before in her entire life. And one of her, I think about 3 days after we launched in in Norway, she put this thing up there, and the lyrics are literally, I'm going to make my first Voisey and I don't know where to start. You know, am I going to make a cover of another song? And it's unbelievable. And her voice was so incredible. It's actually because of Thea. She's called Thief in the app. And yeah, I started playing her to record company friends and A&R friends. And in fact, I played her to Denzel at Platoon, who's I'd say one of the great sets of ears there are in the music industry. And he was like, oh my God, who is this girl? Because
if you don't know, Platoon is a London-based distribution and artist services company started by Denzel Fiegelson and latterly sold to Apple. And if you don't know him, Denzel has a very impressive CV. Let's just take a quick look. This South African-born music exec played an integral part in the launch of iTunes and Apple Music. Some say he was Steve Jobs' right-hand man. He started AWOL, Artist Without a Label, the label services company that he then sold to global music publishing giant Cobalt. Denzel went on to start up Platoon, the artist services company that, amongst others, has brought you the likes of Billie Eilish and UK rapper Stefflon Don, before selling that onto Apple for what was no doubt a very tidy sum. So when we hear Olly talk about the likes of Denzel and Platoon being on board with Voisey, you can take this as an indicator of very real interest, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see how the dots of this this one are joining up. And you don't have to look too hard before you see an apple-shaped spotlight being cast over Voisey. No wonder people are chucking their money at Voisey.
When we started the company, we were thinking about just, what would be a great new lean forward music experience? What would be a great way for people that want to create, that feel terrified to create, or they want to create, there's not really a platform they can create within? Because, we have, TikTok is there as being the lowest common denominator of creativity. There's a very big jump up to YouTube from there, right? If you do TikToks that are interesting, it doesn't mean you're ready for YouTube. It's a very, very different thing. So we tried to start something which would kind of ease the passing between the two, but I think what we've seen with Voisey, it's becoming very, very quickly something which is a real thing in its own right.
You see this as a platform for new talent, to develop new talent, to spot new talent. You're name-checking a lot of people, whether that's friends in the A&R industry, Denzel at Platoon. What's the natural progression for this? Is it into artist management? Is it developing artists to a point where they can then be picked up by a label? Where do they go from here? Because clearly it's a fertile ground for spotting new talent.
We're not doing it to be managers or doing it to be rights owners at all. Like, I think we, when asked by, say, in the case of, say, Olivia with her single that's coming out, she owns her own masters. She owns her own publishing. In fact, she shares it with Adrian, the young guy that uploaded the backing track that she sung over. He owns half of the publishing on the song, as he should do. And we've helped introduce them to areas where they can to get invested in, to be able to record songs. Like Olivia flew here to the UK to record. So, having never left the US before, she flew here a few weeks back, recorded 3 singles, recorded some live stuff, and it's an amazing thing to kind of behold. And that's that there should be a lot of that stuff going on. And what was amazing for Olivia to do that is she's surrounded by interesting people that care deeply about her. And she hasn't signed away anything. She's got a single coming out. It might do amazingly. It's a first single, who knows? But I have such enormous faith in her, and everyone I've introduced her to does as well, because while she's an unknown artist, you can flip into her Voisey profile and see she's written 55 songs in a short space of time. Then you can immediately see how many comments, what people are saying to these songs, what people are saying on her own social media about these songs. And already have a girl that no one's heard of, and pound for pound, she's a prolific songwriter already. People are, she's getting girls and boys jumping on her Instagram that are already Olivia Knight haters, which is, as I said to her, that's, if you've got haters before your first single comes out, you're doing something right. She's got a lot more lovers there. Not in that way.
Let's just take a pause for breath. You're currently working for Space Out Games. You've got Voisey seemingly going great guns. When you were working on UMYX, your peers were Daniel Ek, Alex Leung. When you look around now, 10, 12 years later, what else do you see around you that excites you? What else motivates you to keep doing what you're doing and to keep thinking that this is an exciting and vibrant time for the industry?
I think more than sort of individual ideas or companies, I think it's more the atmosphere that's changed. I think now being an entrepreneur in music isn't a fucking stupid idea anymore, whereas it definitely was for a long time, right? I think there's very few of us, and you Leon, are in this same gang. People, we stuck in it, even though I guess you did go and live in a cave in Spain for 4 years, and still do. But you kept your eye in. A lot of people that were ambitious and switched on, jumped clear of music many years back, thinking like this is a dead end. And so I think what's been a huge change is, there's been a change in the environment. So there's now opportunity again. It's not just a case of how can we respond to the death of the industry. And so I think what we have is companies that are rights reliant, companies that will only live or die by the licenses they hold, like Spotify, like Apple Music. There's no Spotify, there's no Apple Music without the major rights owners' content, right? You need all that stuff.
What used to sort of get me about these companies, and especially so when Spotify IPO'd, this is a company that doesn't own any of the assets that it trades on. And it's being quantified in the billions. It's reliant on record labels, publishers, PROs to grant licenses. Without those licenses, they don't have a business. And yet that business is valued variously at 20, 30 billion, whatever the...
Well, if you look at it on paper, so Daniel Ek and Martin Lawrence, and the two founders, are the richest two people in the music industry ever.
Wow.
Pretty amazing, right? I remember when I first met Daniel years ago, and he had 50 staff, and him and Martin were funding it themselves because they both had successful business in the past. And I remember, like, I met him at like the early old Soho House, and he was, you know, I'm sure I haven't seen him for years, but I'm sure he's a wonderful guy still. But he was saying, like, with a straight face, I've got 50 staff, and I've been paying them for a year and a half. I was like, you're fucking never going to see that money back. So do you know what? Didn't call that one right.
No. Well, actually, in retrospect, what you should have been doing is getting your wallet out and saying, "Is there any way I can put money into it?"
Or I should have hugged around his legs when he left. I think I did do that actually. He made me pay for lunch as well. I do remember that. So Daniel,
as you would.
Yeah. I think the other really big thing is there's now access to capital. If you want to start something in the music industry, it's possible to raise money. If you go back 2011, right? Back then, if you said to a venture capitalist or any prolific investor or any sophisticated investor of any form whatsoever, if you spoke about a music investor, they wouldn't even read, a VC wouldn't take a single meeting with anyone that was pitching music. Well, no matter what a company would raise, the major labels and the publishers would take all that money up as advances anyway. And also no one had the recipe for how to cut through all the shit that was going on anyway. Like, it was far from proven that streaming was going to work. I mean, look, Apple held out for such a long time. I mean, it was sure that no, it'll be file ownership will be the way. But of course, it's now, that ship is well and truly sailed. So that's something that's really changed is you've got more opportunity. Yeah, which I think is a great thing. I think there's a lot of crap. Whenever an industry looks interesting, I think you get access to capital is a real thing. You get a lot of crap, and that's I think happening in music right now. I think you see this huge flight of rights right now, whereby it's almost like the London property market going back a few years, where suddenly everyone's wanting to buy publishing catalogs or music catalogs, and I get 3 people a week approach me, either that I know or through LinkedIn or coming in just literally either selling repertoire or wanting to buy repertoire, and often the sophistication on either side is terrifyingly low. I think that's an interesting thing, and that's not the part of the. I'm not really anything to do with. I understand how licensing fits. I understand how. I understand a lot about licensing in reality, but I try not to be part of that whatsoever. So that's not the opportunities I see in the music industry. The interesting things aren't built around things that require licensure to survive. Again, if I look at new businesses coming to into the forefront right now that are completely rights reliant, like someone that's trying to just use new technology plus licenses, I think you've got to be fucking nuts. I mean, there's a few of them you appear, things like VR. I can't see it personally. Or things like certain gaming applications, a lot of time people are just binding two things together for any old reason. But I think that the main thing that I think is the opportunity is there's a mindset of interest. I think you still have the same sort of issues where you have most people involved with the kind of the established music industry are doing what I'd call sort of rounding error business development, which sort of stuff doing deals that are basically irrelevant, just kind of making themselves look busy. In reality, there's probably 4 or 5 deals that make all of the music industry's money, and there's probably 4 or 5 people that really do them. I think it's good that they obviously invest back in the repertoire and stuff. But there's I think all of these companies have working with them, and I think there's some brilliant people at all the major record companies. I think all of these companies could be hacked down by 2/3 of their size and probably be better.
I think you mentioned VR then as an example of something that's sort of flat-faced, really hasn't really sort of happened or taken off in the way that we thought it might. And I think what you've done inadvertently there is you've highlighted an example of something that I would call a transitional technology. And I think the difference between people like yourself who frankly get lucky sometimes and find that thing that works, whether that's Voisey or Daniel with Spotify, whatever it is. And then there's those people that are still balls deep in the game. They're involved, they're passionate, they find something. But that something may just be a transitional stage to the final product.
We all saw that picture of the whale in the school hall, and I was like, this is going to fucking change my world. And you see, it looks like, imagine a school play of Jeff Goldblum's The Fly. That's what their tech looks like. No offense, Magic Leap.
I've had a demo of this technology, and we may be talking about something different, but I'm not sure we are. I've had a demo of this technology, and you're wearing a headset with clear glass lens. I can have something in my room that I can walk around, it's a solid object. To me, that's potentially a game changer. You know, we're all getting excited about going to see Snoop Dogg's hologram or Amy Winehouse's hologram or, you know, whichever dead artist du jour is being resuscitated through, let's be honest, Victorian technology.
Yeah, I think it's all going to be leading somewhere, because ultimately what we have is an industry that hasn't worked out what lean forward looks like. You have, you know, record companies tell you about like, oh, our lean forward listening stats. But hang on a sec, like, you know, your lean forward means someone's leaning forward when they're looking at the white text on the black background of Spotify. Spotify, all the streaming services are absolutely fantastic, right? But you can't really call it lean forward. You know, the promise of the internet technology was surely more than if you're a massive fan of Metallica or Ed Sheeran or you name Pato fucking Banton. You know, I thought technology would have delivered more than it's got right now, which is I can follow them on Instagram, I can watch their videos on YouTube, I can watch some sort of weird people covering their videos on YouTube, or I can just listen to on a mobile app. Where's the kind of the absolute technicolor immersion? Where's that sort of emotional connection I could have with DJ Khaled if I wanted to have, where is the wonder that technology was supposed to bring? All it did is basically made it more accessible, made the file sizes smaller, initially made it valueless, and now made it worth more money again. But again, if you look at really the plight of kind of response that streaming was, and so picking back up the mobile gaming point is what you had with streaming is capped. All music customers are capped at £10 a month. If you compare that to what people spend on other things, like say people spend within mobile gaming, or people spend within, even people that read books, frankly, like we've capped our customer value really, really low.
A huge oversight, applying a pricing ceiling on a product so early in the life of that product. Well, in fact, again, something we've spoken to other guests about, you look at $9.99, we talk about it as being a ceiling. The reality is the ARPU for many streaming services is almost 50% of that.
Yeah.
ARPU, covered in episode 3, but very quickly, ARPU, ARPU, is the acronym for Average Revenue Per User, derived at by calculating overall subscription revenues, less discounting, divided by the number of subscribers. Got it? Good.
I think it's that thing whereby it is the savior, and Spotify is an incredibly valuable public company, and Apple's Apple, and but the reality is there's still this fear around like, will we upset the entire apple cart if we make it £12? The fact they aren't moving means maybe you are. Maybe people, if you put up Spotify by £2 or Apple by £2 or Deezer by £2, maybe people literally all unsubscribe and go to YouTube.
Getting people to pay for music again has been such a difficult task that it's almost like you say, you don't want to upset the apple cart.
Getting them paying is one thing. Getting them paying more it's been kicked down the horizon. Thinking let's get over this one. But I do think that the opportunities are in areas outside of that. So again, look at TikTok, right? TikTok is now a huge presence in the music industry, right? Its parent company, ByteDance, is worth $75 billion, right? But say if you were to say that TikTok is maybe worth a third of the parent company's valuation. So TikTok's worth the same amount of money as Spotify, which is interesting because none of us here had heard the name TikTok a year and a half ago. If rumors are true, they're going into licensing right now, which is, I'm sure, there's always some very, very intelligent people there. But if you start any company, right, you've got to, and I'm not criticizing these guys, but like for people that approach me all the time asking about like startups, what should I do, what shouldn't I do? The most important thing is like honesty, right? Work out up front, like what is this company idea going to be? Because you get as well, you get pitched this shit all the time, and half the time you want to say like within the first minute, say like, listen, that just doesn't sound like a very good idea for a company. And then other ones, it's like, well, that sounds like a great idea for a record company to go and do. And other ones say, that sounds like a great idea if you want to just enjoy doing something. But some ideas just have certain destinations. And I think the idea of having a business that's completely rights reliant, where a company that can't function without all the licenses in place, because you can't be a TikTok or a Spotify and only have Warner Music and Sony right now. You have to have, and of course you have to have all the publishers, because every single song has, it's very rare not to find 5 different publishing companies owning rights to one song. Very, very rare indeed. And so you can't have any kind of catalog whatsoever without all the major publishers and all the big indies, because of course, it's far less of a kind of a monopoly within publishers. You've got so many publishers that have interesting market share depending on what songs are performing. So if you require licenses, you've got to be, you've got to think really careful about starting that business.
So you're clearly very dialed into everything that's going on in the industry at the moment, the kind of changes that we're seeing, the waves that are being ridden, and the sinking ships. Got to be careful with that one. I guess my question to you is, music aside, where else are you looking? Because you strike me as the kind of guy that's probably got his finger in more than one pie, or at least if he hasn't, he's looking at other pies, wondering how interesting they're going to taste.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm sort of embarrassingly sort of one-track minded when it comes to starting companies within music. But I spend a lot of time in the US. I sort of often, like maybe even a week a month, I'll be in LA. I've traveled so much, and now I'm becoming I'm much more of a diva about it. I'm just now only go to LA. If I have to go to New York, I just don't go. I just LA and London, so get everything done between the two. But one thing I've seen, extraordinary excitement in, which I think is going to be coming back here, is the legalized marijuana and how that's knocking into, so characters in the music industry that are now involved with that as well, right? Because companies like MedMen, I'm not sure if you're aware of MedMen. MedMen is, it's like the Apple store for marijuana products. And you realize it's just such a different thing over there, because suddenly it's like, weed versus alcohol, right? The benefits and the health perils, health benefits. Weed isn't altogether. It's an extraordinarily unrealized thing, and I think research into it has been completely curtailed by big pharmaceuticals that can't own patents on it, and big alcohol companies don't want it to become the thing that is entertainment. What powers entertainment around the world. But suddenly, obviously in the US, it became you had to have a medical card to get it, and now it's actually just freely legal to be able to go and buy stuff. And the amount of
we should just say it's not freely legal across the US, but in certain states
it is, exactly. And I think increasingly it's not federally legal. But what's amazing is just looking at how we see very few areas where kind of music and artists and people that have been successful in music have found other areas to branch into. But I'm seeing a lot of friends of mine and sort of people I've worked with that have been successful guys in music that are also branching out and taking either ownership stakes or investing in kind of in the marijuana movement.
Can you give us any examples of those kind of moves, or the people that are doing that?
I mean, I should probably not say names out front, because I'm not sure if they want to be perceived as that. But I think it's an amazing thing, because it's this thing that's being rebranded so quickly I feel almost an idiot talking about it because I don't know enough depth around it. But it's in terms of one of the biggest things I've witnessed, one of the biggest changes it's like when the internet appeared and music piracy appeared, right? I think I see the amount of time I spend over in the US, it's having a similar knock-on wave to that, whereby, that is something which I've not got any moves or designs on myself, but it's certainly something which has been shocking in terms of how quickly it's taken hold. And also, it seems to be really quite how beneficial it could be. I mean, you very rarely see people beating each other up or stabbing each other when high, or certainly high on marijuana anyway. So I think, and that I think within music is going to be interesting, because one of the huge things you have for artists, and I've done a number of these deals over the years, is kind of name and likeness style deals. Like, how can an artist lend their brand to something which is not just their records? I think that's the thing where the music industry is so underserved is, the name and likeness, because if it's Snoop Dogg's brand or something, or if it's Wiz Khalifa's brand, if it's Willie Nelson, or if it's Tom York, if it's what music fans are buying is they're buying an emotional connection with an artist they love. And so I don't think, I think you could have Paul McCartney weed, if he has ever have some, could be exactly the same thing as Jimi Hendrix weed. And I don't think anyone will care. What people want, though, is what the biggest missed opportunity is, like, these artists, so much of their value is left, so you can peer at them on Instagram, but you can't, and some artists become big enough to actually be able to go and push things out. And this isn't at all just talking about marijuana. It's really talking about how artists have, the records don't make much money anymore for them, let's face it. Not like they used to. You used to get all your money, you put a big album out, and it would sell really well for the first month, right? And that money would flow through the royalty system, you'd get it quite soon. Now, even if you've got a hit record, you're only getting paid when the plays are occurring. And it takes, so someone, it might take you a year to get the value out of someone that you would have got from just buying a record first time out. So artists have to kind of diversify. And for some artists, obviously playing live is a huge thing. It's like, if you're Ed Sheeran, if you're Muse, if you're smaller bands, live is an extraordinarily brilliant moneymaker for them. Something which is quite nascent still is how artists can make more of more of who they are. So brand deal, and so many people talk about brand deals like bands and brands and all that stuff. But actually, if you have a fan base is a really unique cohort of people out there, and I think if you find products or companies that an artist is really into or their fans might be really into, I think there's a lot of stuff that's been badly done there. I think you've had certain agencies that have popped up trying to do it. Invariably, I think these people are useless. I think what you have though is with interesting companies like whether it's Rock Nation or whether it's like Scooter Braun or whether it's Maverick, the kind of these leading management companies, they're really taking it seriously, where they have people that fundamentally understand and are actually friends with their artists, that understand what the artist's name and likeness, how it might match, what the artist is prepared to do, what they're into. And so suddenly you can start crafting these wonderful partnerships that are really, really meaningful.
I agree. And I think you're alluding to something that is really important. And you've given examples of some managers that are really at the leading edge of where this is going. I think what we're looking at now and what is really exciting is looking at the artist as a lifestyle brand. Right. And one component of that lifestyle brand is music.
Look at, say, Rihanna, right? So Rihanna is a thing coming out. Yes, I mean, she's certainly the wealthiest. She's wealthier than Madonna, right? But actually, Rihanna's money is, in recent years, and way more than anything else, has been underwear and nail varnish.
Robin Rihanna Fenty is indeed the richest female musician in the world, with a fortune estimated in excess of $600 million. A much bigger stack than Madonna, who clocks in at $570 million, Celine Dion with a paltry $450 million, and how is she making ends meet? Beyoncé with $400 million. The cosmetic company Fenty, of which Rihanna owns a reported 15%, against the reported 50% owned by luxury goods brand LVMH, is worth in excess of $3 billion. Roll up her earnings from Savage X Fenty, her lingerie business, and the revenues that will pour in from her next venture with LVMH, Fenty, a new clothing house that will sell shoes, jewellery, high-end fashion, accessories and clothing, and billionaire status beckons for the Beijing beauty, as does a potentially very powerful position at the head of a global fashion empire. Oh, and of course she makes music too. And to date, that includes 250 million sales, or their digital equivalent, and 8 studio albums, which throws even more shade in Beyoncé's direction, with her not insignificant sales of 160 million against 7 studio albums. Riri, you've come a long way since hotboxing in the back of a transit van outside Metropolis Studios.
And because Rihanna's brand is so unbelievably effervescent, I don't think there are very few women on planet Earth, it seems, don't have something about Rihanna that they like. It's her attitude, what she's managed to pull off. She's beautiful, she's creative. She's a pretty amazing package. And I think and her focus, if you look at what her output has been in recent years, lots of Fenty stuff, lots of makeup stuff. Very few records. But I think if she stopped making records altogether, it wouldn't be the same. You have to have an underpinning of she's a musician that does these other things. I think even if in 15 years' time, I think Rihanna will still be making records. At that point will be worth multiple billions of dollars and probably one of the greatest lifestyle brands on the planet if she carries on like she is. She's still a musician, right? Whereas a Kardashian never had that underpinning. I think so I like to think they'll be washed away, whereas someone like a Rihanna will never be. The one caveat I'd say, though, is a business outside of your records or playing live, I don't think it's something that most artists will ever have a shot at. Because there's not going to be a world where we've got 500 artists doing interesting brand endorsement deals, because there aren't that many interesting things. There'll be a few, the big kind of brand partnership things that are really good. I see that like bands that play stadiums or probably arenas and up.
Deals like that appeal to the lowest common denominator. They're looking to get as big a bang for their buck as possible. So they want to attach themselves to the star that's got the most recognition across the most markets. I think that, yes, traditionally those were big value deals and those artists made a lot of money, but there were only a handful of artists that were sufficiently recognizable or successful enough to do well out of those kind of deals. I think what we're going to start to see, and this is just me looking into my crystal ball, is given the amount of data we now have available to us, we can start to really pinpoint market. So what we're able to do is forget the lowest common denominator, much bigger budget.
That is Instagram and Facebook's business model. They've already done that, right?
Well, exactly, and that's what I mean. So if you can start selling that data to companies, lifestyle brands that want to communicate to those people,
it becomes too weirdly fragmented. I think you've got, I think there's going to be one-offs that work. But I can't see it as being a sort of a big bright future for. I think recording artists have to they've got to make incredible albums, do incredible shows, and the few there are that are able to do that rare thing, to be able to write great records is so fucking rare. To be able to put on a great show, even more rare, and you don't need to be able to do both. You definitely need to be able to do one, and probably someone can write a great record for you, do a great show. But I think this, for such a long time, there's always been mooted as being this future of like bands and brands, but actually invariably it falls flat because it's not a perfect match. I think there are ones, I think, like I said, it's like the stadium and the arena. It's like, it's such a rare set of things that have to fall in place, because otherwise it becomes, music becomes even more boring than it's become already. If it's suddenly a case of like, Zara Larsson has got to talk to someone at VW, like that's just terrible. She should be out there writing amazing songs and going out and, and trashing a few hotel rooms. I mean, that's what music industry needs, more of that, not more. How can we further homogenize our artists so brands want to use them as vehicles? So that's not wanting to constantly name check Voisey, but that's why we love what we're doing with Olivia, and there's so many other artists that we have lined up to come after Olivia. It's like, no, we'll pay for you to go and record stuff. We'll fly to where you need to go and be. We'll push your records out there. You'll still own them all. But to not homogenize artists, not make them jump too high a pedestal to be able to put their art out into the world. That's what the music industry should be, and that's where the investments and the kind of technology and the bright minds. That's where it should all be focusing, is on like, how do you create a music industry that suddenly can be self-sufficient again, not one that requires fucking Tesco's to go and stamp the back of your baby's head.
I get it.
Sorry if that was a strong opinion.
I guess what I was getting at was, rather than opening up a new large stream of revenue that's a result of a brand that wants to tap into a very niche market that me as a singer sings to, I guess what I'm alluding to is almost a path to creative independence for the artist. Rather than going and doing a traditional type deal, no control over your masters, beholden to how and when your label wants to manage, release, distribute your music, promote you, what sort of person, what sort of artist they want to promote you as.
There are now ways of like, so companies like Voisey coming out, we find people, we spot talent first, we find them the money, and we get them to push records out without signing anything with anyone. That's a great thing. But also you've got, putting records out isn't just throwing money into the abyss. It's actually, money can be made from releasing records right now. It's not just easier to raise money for music companies. I think there's definitely a viable thing which you brought to me, and it's been a big point of yours, whereby artists can actually start raising money independently. Like, in the UK we have SEIS, do a beep on this for what SEIS is, but suddenly there's, if someone is starting a creative enterprise and its product happens to be music and videos and social media footage, that's still a company, and the person in that band works for that company, and so you can raise money where the person putting the money in gets almost all the money back on tax, and it's a great way of kind of seeing funds into the music industry, because I think that's always been the big problem, like with startup companies as per artists, until the only time you have deals on the table is when you don't need them. In most cases, people go and raise venture capital. You go and have so many companies go out there doing 50 venture capital pitches, like no offers or one offer, so you might as well just met that person straight off if you could do. The only time you have an embarrassment of riches is when you don't need them. I think what the music industry need to work out is it's the same as getting signed to a record company. You can have an amazing artist, right? Now, so in the case of Olivia, Olivia I think could sign to any major record company tomorrow. A lot of them have been in touch. It's her decision not to. But most artists, the reason she's doing that, while she's new and unknown, she's had millions of plays, right? So already there's something to stamp it. You can see she's got this prolific kind of creative output already. But in most cases, like, you could be the new Tekashi 6ix9ine. You look similar, but you could be without any proof points. No one's taking a bet on you at all, right? Whereas that's, I think, what would be an interesting to work out. It's like how those artists can find a way of getting small amounts. It doesn't need to be £100,000. For a lot of artists, getting $5,000, get $3,000 to actually have someone. You don't need to pay to record anymore. Maybe even having something you can probably get recorded, mixed, and mastered pretty much for free by friends with headphones and interesting software, with something which will at least compete, right? But now it's maybe just getting that first lift, as everyone talks about going viral and stuff. But invariably, some sort of money needs to change hands to be able to get an initial lift of activity. Or maybe it's even the case of just having a manager who's got the money to go out and suddenly do what I did, is hustle through the phone books to find someone that works in playlisting at Spotify, someone that runs, that works in YouTube Music in Australia, that picks artists to watch 2019, and take those people out for lunch. That's you've got to have the ability to. that's the kind of hustle that needs to take place. And I know that's not necessarily the most natural endpoint for talking about investment, taking people out for lunch, but I'd say actually probably some of the best money you ever spend is by taking people out for lunch. Or I mean, some of the biggest deals I've pulled off have been from when I say to people like, oh, I'm actually going to be in LA next week. I had no plans to be there, but if you're suddenly going to be in town anyway, you get FaceTime with them, and then suddenly 3 months later, extraordinary things have happened.
I think that's a huge nugget of fantastic advice right there, because you are absolutely right. I've been speaking to somebody and I know there's no intent, they've got no intention of coming to London. To be honest, the kind of conversation I have with them is predicated on the fact I know they're not going to show up on my doorstep. Yeah. But then they offer to, and then suddenly you are having lunch with them. And maybe it is an opportunity that otherwise you'd have overlooked, or maybe your initial call was on it was right. What you're alluding to and what you're underlining here is this is a personality-driven business. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter what you do. It's really down to who you know and how well you get on with them, and how well you're able to present yourself, and how well you manage and nurture a relationship with those people that you're doing. If that means to take them out to lunch, great.
It's two things, isn't it? I'd say, like, and I hate the word entrepreneur, but that's how I'd class myself. It's basically you're judged on two things. One is the extent to which you would die for what you're doing, and the second one is your track record. And the more of the second you have, the more track record you have, the less you have to throw yourself into the flames. You still have to always be prepared to die for something, but actually, until you've got track record, you just have to be that person that's just so perversely interested in what you're doing. And so the kind of, whether they're in or they're out, the person you're speaking to, whether they're going to invest, not going to invest, do a deal with you or not, they have to kind of leave thinking you're weird because you're so into something.
How easy do you think it would have been to get those conversations off the ground if you didn't have the experience that you've had, if you weren't able to name drop UMYX, Universal, Audio, if you were coming at this fresh, how much airtime do you think you'd have got?
I mean, a lot less. I'm able to pick up the phone and call anyone I need to call to be able to make this thing happen. And like in the UMYX days, it was all about, you had the time to go out and sort of grind it out. Whereas now I think if you start companies, you've got to show flair much quicker. Because the investment, while there's an investment appetite in music right now, that means there's also an appetite to make money quickly. And no one, people are prepared. People will be disappointed if they give them $1 million and they get 10 million back 3 years later. That's a fail. People want to give you, and that used to be the thing. Venture capitalists used to care about 10x. Can we get 10x? Now people want 5,000x. I mean, it's crazy, but you want the whole idea of a company that you see a company that's been sold for $250 million that's raised 3 rounds of venture capital. My first thing is like, shit, I hope the founders got some money, because they probably didn't in that case, because liquidity preference, all these things build up. The long games in music were the long rights reliant games. Spotify and Apple, as we've spoken about at length, those were the long slogs, and it's paid off from enormously. Now it's about rapid reactions for the time that we're in. Can you raise money, have an idea that hits the market quickly, is really well primed for what it is? I don't think you have that much time to go and feel it out. And so I think if you are starting a company in this space, you need to spend as much time as you can under the radar as possible. Because again, it's that thing like back in the day, if you were an unsigned band that suddenly the A&R radar had gone off about you, the new Supergrass, if you hadn't been signed in 3 months, you were never going to get signed, because all people would know at that point is no one else has signed you, and therefore the heat's gone. I think that's way more the case right now. I think with some tech it can go along, like you talked about transportative tech like VR and stuff. I totally agree. I think that's going to go somewhere new, whether it's to AI taking us over to human machine hybrids, which I'm hoping for, the eventual arrival of the sex robot. It could be anything. Maybe that's what it's all about.
I mean, eventual. You've been banging away at that for a long time now, quite literally.
But it's I think being able to strike while the iron's hot and be fast is really important, and also most importantly, it keeps it interesting as well. I think you can't, if you do what I do and you effectively start companies or you lead new ideas for bigger companies, you've also got to be able to carve out a way of enjoying your life. The one sad thing is I've traveled the world mainly on my own. I've been everywhere. So it's been a great existence, but you need to move fast.
It can grind you down after a while as well.
It really can, yeah. And people are like, oh, this must be something amazing. Like obviously you're lucky and you fly in the nice part of the plane, but after a while, it's all the fucking same thing. It's just another 15 hours sitting in a tube going to LA to go and have an argument with someone about, that might not even turn up at the meeting.
It's difficult to maintain relationships when you're traveling like that, whether that's with your mates or with your partner or whomever.
Or your children, which are the only reason I do anything anyway. So.
Agreed. I think you've just given us a very, very sort of clear view of the sort of short-term potential. What are the long-term gains? We mentioned earlier briefly about copyright acquisition and publishing. If you were looking at sort of a long-term play in the music business at the moment, what would you be looking at? What do you think's interesting? What do you think's got legs?
But I think the big thing I see as being the shift of the music industry. I think all the companies are going to be owned by different people quite soon. I think that's going to have a dynamic shift of its own right. I think it's very, very likely that the Universal Music Group is, obviously we know it's very public, it's going to be owned partially or in whole by someone else. I think it's almost a given that's going to be owned by a Chinese company.
Agreed. We've spoken about that with other
they're
guests.
very open about it, right?
Yep.
And so I think that's going to have with it all sorts of shifts as well. Because I think, again, mapping back to, say, mobile gaming, like all of the innovation and all of the real inventive step is taking place in Asia, and then we're copying them. It's normally the other way around. Normally you have this, especially within anything creative, you normally have the kind of the genesis of something is here, it's in the US or it's in Europe. Technology is it's expanded upon over in Asia. But that, the genesis of interesting creative has been over here in the UK or in the US or in Europe. Obviously Scandinavia massively on the music side of things. I think what we're seeing now is like within gaming, all the inventive stuff is happening over there. We're struggling to keep up with them. The most popular games on earth are Chinese companies. In fact, the most popular mobile games on earth aren't even available outside China, and they're making like $3-4 billion a year per game. There's brilliance over there. There's so much money, and they're playing. You talk about who's playing the long game. They've been playing the long game. In Western Internet, they're Fortnite. Who owns most of Fortnite? Oh, Tencent does. Who owns 10% of Spotify? Oh, hi, Tencent again. And there's many others like it. Who owns TikTok? Oh, hi, ByteDance. And also look at just on the pure maths alone, right? And obviously maths is never a way of filtering through to creativity, but 1.5 billion people there, right? There's got to be about as good as Radiohead in a short amount of time. There's enough, you throw enough human beings at a problem. It's like not using the kind of monkeys in a room typewriters Shakespeare analogy, but there's a point in time where Chinese artists is not just Chinese technology. What about Chinese recording artists? There's got to be a Chinese Eminem, and obviously, like sonically, that they have access. Music is transported everywhere right now, but there must be people being inspired by Muse that live in Shenzhen. Shenzhen place.
The only barrier is cultural,
right?
And I think once you remove that cultural barrier, once you have access to whether it's Western cultures or for that to go the other way and for Western cultures to have unmitigated access to Chinese culture, and so one can wash into the other in a way that means a Chinese artist can appeal to a Western audience in the way that it can't, frankly, at the moment, fight a great firewall or whatever, cultural war, however you want to view it. And I think that is something that may or may not change, but is a huge factor. And yes, we may well have a huge amount of talent there.
So we've been waiting even longer for the North Korean XXXTentacion to appear.
I'm afraid so.
Yeah, damn.
On that bombshell, Olly Barnes, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Music Talks.
And breathe. Did you make it? Still here? That was some heavy verbiage right there from a man who just doesn't have time for breath. But however fast or slow, I think you'll agree Olly is a very interesting character. And I have a feeling Voisey won't be the last project we see his name attached to. Far from it. And did you join some of those apple-shaped dots together? I wonder how much closer and cozier Apple will be getting to Voisey. Watch this space, and if you haven't done so already, download the app. You know where to do that. Just make sure you spell it right. Voisey. Voisey. And make yourself a superstar. Talking of superstars, get yourself to our website, www.musictalks.fm, to subscribe. We have direct links to most providers, iTunes, Podbean, TuneIn, Stitcher, etc., etc. Twitter and Insta are @HelloMusicTalks. Shout to the tireless Backroom team, and as ever, huge props to Brutal Deluxe, the man machine behind our theme and the show's audio. Finally, big thank you to you, the listener. We know you're spoiled for choice here in Podcastville, and we are super grateful that you choose to point your ears in our direction. We won't let you down. Trust me, we have even more fantastic guests coming down the Music Talks pipeline. Okay, Let's flip this burger. It's time to say goodbye once more. This is Music Talks. My name is Leon Hill, and this has been a Music Talks production. Join us again next week, but for now, keep it quickfire.